Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Creative Corner. Today we are going to be talking about Photography 101. What that means is that we're going to look over some of the basics, the functions of how to operate the camera on your phone, as well as an actual digital camera. And then we'll go ahead and go over some technical terms, and then that'll be it for today. Before we actually get started with the basics of photography, I would like to go over some of the equipment that I'm using myself. So I have my personal phone, which is an LG V60. It is on the 5G network, so it's a little bit more newer. And then I also do have my Canon EOS Rebel T7 camera, which we're going to be using for the demonstration. You can apply these basics to whatever device you have at home, but this is just the stuff that I myself personally use. So the first thing we got to talk about is the settings on your camera. You have multiple settings depending on what kind of camera you have. If you take a look at them, they're depicted by several diagrams, like a flower or a mountain or a person running. The settings that I prefer myself is a manual setting, and it's usually marked or indicated with an M. So we're going to apply that. And then the phone is going to be a little bit different, so I'll go over that too as well. But as far as your camera settings go, when you turn it on, if you are in manual and you have an LED screen, the settings will automatically pop up, and then you'll just make some minor adjustments. One of the things is called the aperture, and it's indicated by the F followed by a number. The lower the number, it portrays the depth of field. So if you have a lower number, the person or item or your subject, whatever you're focused on, will be nice and clear and crisp. And then everything in the background is going to be a little bit blurred. And then that's reverse. If you have a higher number, everything in the background is going to be more crisp, and then everything in the foreground or towards you is going to be more blurry. And then the second thing you'll need to pay attention to is going to be the shutter speed. There we go. The shutter speed itself, if you look at your camera, is depicted by the number 1 with a slash and followed by a number. With the shutter speed, if you want, if you're doing motion capture or any type of sports or NASCAR, anything that's moving, you want, if you want, you can have it at a lower number, and that's going to leave things blurry because you're trying to focus on that subject. But if you want things nice and crisp, you want to increase the number. So right now on my camera, my aperture setting is at 4.5, which is going to have my subject nice and crisp, and then my background is going to be blurry. And then as far as my shutter speed is, it's 4,000th of a second, so it's going to be almost instantaneously. The next thing on your camera settings is the ISO. The ISO is the sensitivity to light. And the overall sensitivity, if you have it on auto, it's going to auto adjust to make sure all the colors are reading equally. But if you mess with it, the lower the number, the more light you're going to be letting into your camera, so it's going to distort the image a little bit. And then contrary, if you have a very high number, it's going to let in very little light, so it's not going to register your colors as clear and precise as possible. If you take a look at your camera, my LED screen keeps shutting off on me. If you look at your camera, there is a scale on your LED screen. It has a negative on one side and then a positive on the other side. Your ISO number should be somewhere In the middle, when you take a photo, it will register and it'll bring up that scale to let you know where along the scale it is. So my suggestion is utilizing around 400 to 600 ISO if you want a really good photo. And if you want, this ties into a white balance. So your camera settings have auto white balance, and it's going to adjust the lighting as well as making it nice and clear and precise. But there are also some accessories you can get, and this is called a gray card. If before you start, you take a picture of this gray card next to your subject, and then you go into your auto white balance settings or your white balance settings. Select the photo with the gray card, and it's going to adjust the photo light sensitivity to match the neutral gray in your photo too as well. It also depends on the lighting. If you're doing any outside lighting, clouds are a natural diffuser. That means it spreads the light nice and evenly across your subject. You also can purchase one of these, which is a diffuser. But clouds are a natural diffuser, so if you need to take any outdoor shots and it's nice and cloudy, that's the perfect ideal time to take photos. One of the other things is the rule of thirds. Now, I learned this in school, but the rule of thirds, our eyes are naturally drawn to the overall area of your subject is the third lines, both vertically as well as horizontally. So if you're looking through your viewfinder on your camera or your phone, you want to make sure that whatever subject you're taking a picture of is that they follow along the tic-tac pattern, because our eyes are not naturally drawn to the four intersecting points. And because we're taught to read from left to right, it is ideal to have everything along the right hand side of this line here. And then if you're taking pictures of people, along the top line here, or if you're doing landscapes, the bottom line here. This just helps enhance your photo a little bit more to make it a little interesting for people to view it. And then the other thing on your camera is whether you take a photo in landscape, which is left to right, or portrait, which is up and down. And then one of the things, if you're taking outdoor shots or you don't have a tripod available, I have a tripod myself, but if you don't have one available, you can always stand shoulder width apart with your legs, kind of have yourself planted, put most of your weight into your lower half of your body. You're going to grab your hand, place your camera in your hand, and then wrap your fingers around the lens itself, and then try to keep your arms as close to you as possible, and you're using your body as a natural tripod itself too as well. So again, to sum up everything, we have the aperture, which if you have a lower number on your camera settings, is going to bring your subject in focus, and then everything in the background is going to be blurred. Your shutter speed, if you're working with athletes or if you're taking any moving shots and you need to make the image still, you're going to have a very high number. So on my camera settings, I have 1/4000th of a second. That is very fast. It's almost instantaneously. But if you want very nicely blurred images, you want a low number. So 1/30th of a second, or even possibly lower than that, depending on your camera settings. We also talked about the ISO settings, and that's the sensitivity to light. So the camera reads how much light is coming in, as well as the variables for the color itself. If you have a low number, it's going to register all the colors correctly, but if you have a very high number, it's going to distort your image by letting in more light, which is gonna brighten up your colors depending on your settings. We talked about the rule of thirds. To make your image more interesting, you want to make sure that you take photos based on the rule of thirds, having your subject at the intersecting lines on the thirds. Most cameras nowadays have the settings to turn on the rule of thirds onto your viewfinder or even your LED screen. And then we also talked about exposure, making sure the light comes in correctly. And then let's go ahead and take a practice on our phone. So if you open up your camera and you look at your settings, on my phone in particular, your camera phone might be a little bit different, but all my settings are for what we just talked about are going to be on the bottom of the settings page. So if you want, you can take very interesting photos, and then I will go ahead and post of the image that we just took of the camera. And my viewfinder on my phone has the rule of thirds already turned on to as well. And then last but not least, we talked about orientation. So the image that I took is in landscape, which is left to right. You also can choose up to down, which is portrait. Landscapes are perfect for landscapes just because you capture more of the terrain. And then portraits are ideal if you're taking pictures of people. But you can mess with it, play with it. You can also change the settings on both your camera and your phone to see what works best for you. I have a very amount of accessories, the diffuser, the gray card, the tripod. I also have an external flash. Most cameras have a built-in flash, and most phones also do have a built-in flash too. So it is entirely up to you, but these are just some of the basics to consider to getting a perfect photo. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Creative Corner. We talked about photography basics. Next week we are going to be working on nebula coasters for Sci-Fi Fest, so be sure to stay tuned for that. If you aren't already, be sure to subscribe to our social media accounts. We have everything from Facebook to Instagram, as well as our YouTube page. And then if you would like to get updates on a monthly basis, we also do have a newsletter, and you can go to our website, which is OFPL.online. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.